Hello, everyone, and welcome to the podcast, A Journey Through Nature and Science. I'm your host, Don Murphy. With us today is Dan Ariely. He's an Israeli-American professor and author. He serves as a James B. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics at Duke University. He is the co-founder of several companies implementing insights from behavioral science. Dan wrote an advice column called Ask Ariely in the Wall Street Journal from June 2012 until September 2022. He's also the author of 3 New York Times best-selling books, predictably Irrational, which served as the basis for the really hit television show, which I enjoy watching, The Irrational. It's an NBC program. He's also written The Upside of Irrationality and The Honest Truth About Dishonesty. He produced the 2015 documentary Dishonesty, The Truth About Lies. And his laboratory at Duke, the Center for Advanced Hindsight, pursues research in subjects like the psychology of money, decision-making by physicians and patients, cheating, and social justice. So Dan, welcome to the program. It's good to have you here.
Lovely to be here, and thank you for the few minutes introduction to your life that we had before we started this discussion.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it was great chatting with you. So tell us, what is it that motivated you to get started on this life's journey? I mean, did you have some personal epiphany? What was it inside of you as a human being that said, this is the course my life should be taking?
Do you mean in general, when I adopted the questions about why do I want to be a social scientist, or why am I studying now the end of life?
Well, I'm really interested. So you are, working in psychology, economics. If I'm correct, you started off interested in physics and philosophy.
Yeah.
So as a human being, we're often motivated by things that happen to us as a kid or something. So I'm just wondering if there's what started
What
you on
happened to
this
me?
journey you're on.
So, the reason I have this funny half a beard
Mm-hmm.
is maybe I'll start with that. So why do I have this half a beard? This half a beard has 3 reasons. The first one is that I was very badly burned. Most of my
Mm-hmm.
body, 70% of my body was burned. I was in hospital for 3 years. And this side of my face is just burnt. It's just all scars, so there's no hair on this side. So that explains one part of, life in hospital is very tough. Gets you to observe and think and change my motivation dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe I'll continue with the half a beard story to explain myself. Now I could shave, and if I shaved, I would look less strange. Why don't I shave? So for a long time I shaved, and then a few years ago I went on a month-long hike. You had the epiphany of spending time in nature when you were much younger. For me, it took me when I was 50. So when I was 50, I took a month off and I went hiking for a month. And at the end of the month, I looked sort of like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked in the mirror and I didn't like the way I looked. It's strange to you. It was strange to me. And I thought to myself, I'll shave this half a beard off, but I'll give it 2 or 3 weeks just as a reminder of this month-long hike. And then the
Right.
first strange thing happened, which is that people wrote me and thanked me for the half a beard. I posted all kinds of things in social media, not about the half a beard, and people thanked me for the half a beard. Now, why did people thank me for the half a beard? These were people who were struggling with their own injuries. For example, there was a woman in her 50s who told me that when she was 17, she had a car accident and she didn't wear a dress or a skirt since. And she said,
Mm-hmm.
now that you're so out there with your lack of symmetry and injury, I'll try it as well. So I said, okay, if this half a beard is helping people feel that they can hide less their injuries, I'll keep this half a beard for a bit longer. But then the next thing happened, which is really strange, which is about 4 months into this half a beard, I started feeling differently about my own injury. Now, I had like this higher level of acceptance. I didn't feel
Mm-hmm.
it was me and my injury. I felt this was just part of the story of my life.
Right.
Um, and I thought, where is this self-acceptance now? I got injured when I was 18. I'm many years after that. Why now? And I think it's about the hiding that these people were talking about. So think about
Mm-hmm.
somebody like me shaving. I start with smooth cheek on one side, stubble on the other one. And the act of half shaving is also the act of becoming less non-symmetrical. It's an
Uh-huh.
act of hiding. It's an act of being less visible. Stubble here, no stubble here, very, very salient. And letting go of that was incredibly helpful, right? Letting go
Uh-huh.
of that. And this brings us to the final point where I'm telling you this story is here I am a social scientist, and I'm supposed to know that keeping a half a beard would have helped me with self-acceptance. But I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know about it. If you asked me 10 years ago, how would it feel like to be with half a beard? I would say terrible. I would say kids would laugh, people would point, people would ask questions. Not a good idea. And indeed, day one is not a good idea. But I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't be able to predict the long-term process of self-acceptance. And I think that this is what social science is for, is to discover the things about life that we don't naturally intuit, but actually would create a better life for us.
Right.
And and this more generally, it's what motivated me when I started studying social science. I saw lots of things in hospital I didn't like. I didn't like bandage removal. I didn't like the way they were giving pain treatment. There was lots of things I didn't like. And I wanted to study social science, pain in the beginning, to improve people's lives. And and right now, one of the biggest topics I'm studying is the last chapter of people's lives. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
about this period from when people get a diagnosis of a terminal illness until the end of
Right.
life. And I'm trying to think about all the things that people are making not the best decisions for themselves and
Mm-hmm.
how can we do to help. And that's for me is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to use science as a tool to understand where is the gap between where we are now and where we would have liked to be, and can we use some insights from social science to narrow that gap.
I totally understand. I mean, that's a beautiful story. I mean, your motivation came out of a life experience. It came a little bit later, sort of like me. I mean, I was 30 when I had my epiphany that took me
Yeah.
kind of on the journey, and so it's interesting, and I love the communication or the analogy, the asymmetrical part of what you're talking about that had to do with self-discovery. That was must have been a huge insight. Did you wake up one morning and come to that insight?
No, it was very interesting. Look, when you have a physical injury, it's very easy to observe your injury and to understand it. So this hand is not very good. This is all the movement I have.
Hmm.
But when I look at your hand, very easy to say, oh, this is not so functional. I can see your hand. And in the physical world, we have evidence of how things should have worked. The mental world is very different. Think about somebody with any kind of mental issue. If something takes a long time, if you wake up one day and you're in a fog, or you can't speak, or okay, very easy to understand. But if something takes a while, because we can't compare it to other people. I can compare my hand to yours. I can't compare my well-being to yours. Like we're engulfed in our own understanding of ourselves and we're very limited. So I had this feeling that I was much more at peace with myself. Look, I have lots of scars and lots of deformities. Um, and all of a sudden, I felt more comfortable with my body in all kinds of ways.
Right.
Romantically, publicly. It's very tough for somebody like me, for example, to shake people's hands because people don't know
Hmm.
what to do with this hand. Some people do like
Right.
this. Some people do. I mean, they don't know what. I don't blame anybody for doing that. It's a strange hand,
I
but it's a
understand.
it's an act of awareness, because I put my hand up for shaking. People don't know what to do, and it kind of is okay, so people don't know what to do with me. But all of a sudden, everything was fine. Now, it took me a while to say, oh my goodness, I'm living life in a different way. I haven't been
Mm-hmm.
concerned about things. I felt better about my romantic life. I felt better about meeting people I don't know. And so it took me a while to recognize that an improvement actually happened.
All right, I understand. Well, let's switch reels for a minute. I mean, you've had such an interesting, career, and you wrote this advice column. Uh, I'm interested in knowing kind of personally, and I'm sure others are too. What's the either the weirdest question or the most interesting question you responded to when you were doing your advice column?
So, so I think one of the most meaningful answers was a woman who had brain cancer.
Hmm.
And she asked me how to tell her kids. And one of my first research papers was whether we should rip bandage off slowly or quickly.
Right, I
And
remember I read
by the
that.
way, the answer is slowly.
Yes.
And she made the analogy. She made the analogy between telling her kids slowly versus to bandages. And I told her, look, the analogy is interesting, but it's not great. I'm not sure that what holds for bandages holds for communication. But
Right.
I said, but we started talking. I didn't feel comfortable answering her over the Wall Street Journal pages, so we corresponded. And it turns out she lived in a city that I was going to be at that city later that week, and we met and we talked about it. And eventually we decided that the important issue was not to lose the trust of her kids. So we
Hmm.
said maybe for the process of getting him used to it, slow would have been better than fast. I had a test. Let's see what. But we also agreed that if they ever found out that you didn't tell them the whole truth, it will have a huge cost down the line.
Hmm. Right.
But that was a very meaningful time because we got to meet, we got to connect. Um, so that was one very meaningful. I'll tell you about another one. There was another guy who got paralyzed from the neck down, and
Hmm.
he asked me the question of how does he find happiness in life? And again, it's a little bit too complex to answer on a page of the journal. So we talked, and I tried to help him. And we kept in touch for about 4 months, trying to kind of figure out how to find. He was paralyzed from the neck down. And eventually he decided to commit suicide. So his sister called me to tell me that he took his life.
Hmm.
And that actually took me on a journey of trying to understand why some people give up and some people fight. So I actually went and spent a day with about 12 people who had very severe injuries, and I thought were thriving, and to try and understand what was it the source of
Hmm.
resilience that kept them going. So anyway, this is a long answer to your questions, but for me, the things that are the most impactful from the questions people ask me are not the answers I can give people. Like today, people still ask me questions. Today, somebody asked me, why do people get tattoos? And I answered,
Hmm.
of course. But and it's fun to think about these things, but the meaningful ones are things that are taking me on a journey that I
Right.
didn't expect. So Ben, the guy who committed suicide, I went to try and understand resilience as
Hmm.
a part of that, and that discussions and the struggle and the questions he brought are still with me.
So you're
Um,
learning as much as you're answering and giving information, you're taking in and learning and growing as a result through your interactions with people. I mean,
yeah,
that's really pretty amazing. I'm going to ask you a difficult question, if you don't
so
mind. So this is all about irrationality. And there's so many irrational things going on in the world today. You're Israeli born. And so my
Actually,
question,
born in New
in
York, but grew up
born
in
in New
Israel.
York, but raised in Israel.
Israel.
That's
Yeah.
right. Thank you for correcting me there. So my question really has to do with um, what is going on in the Middle East seems to be so irrational. And is there a solution? I mean, but you
Yeah.
also talk about there being an upside to irrationality. I don't see much of an upside to
No.
the conflict and the carnage going on, but that just seems totally irrational behavior. And then, of course, you could look at war in general and say that
Yeah.
war is irrational. What's going
So
on there?
so first of all, let me say, not all irrational behavior is bad, but there are some irrational behaviors that are wonderful.
Hmm.
For example, our capacity for love, for
Hmm.
poetry, for generosity. These things are irrational, but
Hmm.
but they're wonderful. I mean, even think about this podcast right now.
Hmm.
You have a desire to have interesting conversations. You
Hmm.
have a desire to make yourself less happy and more happy, and have turbulent activities, right? A fish would not want that. So humanity, we have different things that drive us than just rationality. We're not you like from what you told me about your life, you would have not considered a good life sitting on the beach drinking mojito. You challenge yourself. You did difficult things, and the things you're proud of are things that are complex. You even said that you did things to because you felt this was a contribution. This is like, but not what you wanted, right? So I think all of these are irrational, but in a good way. So anyway, so that's one comment. Middle East. So look, my sense is that there's a long-term view and a short-term view. And what's happening in the Middle East is that on the Israeli side, the short-term thinking is overpowering the long-term thinking. And on the side of Hamas, it's the long-term thinking that is overpowering the short-term thinking.
Interesting.
So Hamas, the Islamic Jihad in general, the Islamic Brotherhood, the Islamic Brotherhood in general is saying that life on this earth is just temporary and it's not that important. It doesn't matter what we sacrifice here. It's about heaven. And it's not that they say, they believe it. So when you say, let's compromise on having a nicer life right now, they said, not interested. That's not important to us. So we have a group. By the way, I don't think it's true for Palestinians. It's true
Hmm.
for Hamas, right? So
Right.
Hamas is a extreme Muslim group that should not be called Muslim, right? It's a it's
Mm-hmm.
a it's a it's a the fact that they control Gaza is horrific, but that's what we have. But it's a group of extreme Islamic who say dying now is no problem. That's not the issue. It's on. And then on the Israeli side, you have a government that says we are not thinking long term. We are thinking short term. And right now we want to stay in power. And right now, hate hate begets hate.
Right.
And they want to show strength, and they want to show that they're not giving up. And you get votes. I mean, one of the weakness of modern democracy is that when we had a communication channel where our leaders had to communicate with everybody, they had to
Right.
communicate with everybody and keep some symbols of truth. Now each leader talks only to their people, and the
Right.
conversation is not about truth anymore. It's about identity, a lot of it. So we have a really terrible situation. On the Israeli side, the government says hate and aggression is keeping us in power.
Right.
And on the Hamas side, they said losses of lives in Gaza is doesn't matter to us. And every day that more people die in Gaza, we are winning more. So it's a
For me, I'm looking at this and talking to you, and I'm saying what I'm observing seems to be irrational, but you're explaining that in their belief system, in that paradigm, in that construct, the behavior is rational, or it's
so so
irrational in a positive way.
that's right. I don't want to say it's rational because it's logical. Rational
Mhm.
is a different definition. Rational, I like the rational definition that it's actually about your long-term best interest. Like, I think that the beliefs of the the Muslim Brotherhood are wrong. I
Mhm.
don't think God wants people to have a miserable life here and die, and it's all about heaven. I think they're wrong. So, but for them, it's consistent. But
Mhm.
it's not rational, but it's logical based on their beliefs.
Mhm.
Um, but when if you and I want to negotiate on something, and we both want to wake up in the morning and have coffee, and we want to hug our significant other, and we want to see a tree, and then we have something to talk about. We have a common language. In between Israel and Hamas, there's no commonality.
Right. I
There's no
understand.
commonality. Now, I think that the only hope for steps forward is if somebody else will be the adult in the room, and we would force the two sides to compromise. And the
Understand.
reason is that they're each beholden to their citizens
Hmm.
to in a for a very, very extreme side. If Israel now would withdraw from Gaza one-sidedly, um, the government, after having such a strong position, would people would feel they've betrayed them.
Correct.
And if Hamas gave back the hostages right now, they would feel that they are betraying their own promises. So I think that in this situation, everyone needs to feel to have a reason. There's something we call reason-based choices.
Right.
And reason-based choices, I don't know if you remember that there was a saying, you can't go wrong buying IBM.
Right.
And it turns
I
out you can't
remember.
go wrong buying IBM. But what the statement was trying to say is that there are some cases in which we're looking for a story about why we made that decision. I hired McKinsey. Oh, can't fault me for doing this. I bought
Mhm.
IBM for doing this. In this case, I think both leaderships need to keep appearances that were
Mhm.
not the ones who gave up, and we need an adult in the room who would force them
Right. And
to.
the United States has been trying to play that role, but unfortunately not very successfully. I want to switch reels because I know we're going to run out of time here because you have a hard stop coming up here soon. And so I kind of want to get personal here for a second, but it has to do with work that you're doing. And I understand that you're working with physicians and patients, or you're trying to understand the patient physician relationship in the context of decision making. And I just went through a period of cancer treatment where I had to make decisions with my doctors, which were very interesting. Tell us about the work you're doing there. What are you trying to figure out, or what were you trying to figure out there?
So it's been a while I've been studying this research for a while, but the question is very broad. And the question is to try and understand all the mistakes that people do between the time when they get a terminal illness diagnosis and end of life. Very, very broad.
Hmm.
And what can we improve? So The reality, and tell me if you felt like this, is that when people get a diagnosis of a terminal illness, they basically become patients. We're supposed to be humans, and
Hmm.
you can adopt the role of patient as a side job, but people adopt the role of a patient as their main job, and you can understand why. It's something new, something frightening, and very few people would say to a doctor, Thursday I have I'm going to the park. Not good time for you to meet. Like it really is becoming a priority, and
Hmm.
and people live by that. Now, one of the things we're finding is that people are stopping to pay as much attention to their humanity. So we're trying to get people to focus on do something every day that makes you happy. Let's think about your goals. Let's
Hmm.
think about what's important to. Yes, we want you to be healthy. We're not against modern medicine. I'm all for modern medicine, but
Right.
but we can't become just patients. So
Right.
so
Well,
what have I
interesting you
done?
mentioned, well, you mentioned, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you mentioned how did I feel? And that's part of what I
Yeah.
wanted to talk to you about because I didn't feel like a patient. When I got my diagnosis, I immediately felt, wow, I'm 73 years old. I've lived a miracle. I am so freaking grateful, for the life that I've lived. And I and I know this may be hard to believe, but we're talking in some sense about irrationality. I was almost euphoric in some ways, and I don't think it was a denial. That's just me, and I know everybody's
Mhm.
different, but I really didn't feel like a patient in the sense of feeling different or looking at life different. If anything, it gave me a deeper appreciation for the life that I've lived. Is that irrational?
And no, no, look. A lot of it depends on your doctor, and I mean also on you, but it also depends on the
Mhm.
doctor and how they made you think and how they made you feel about this and
Mhm.
how much time they had for you and so on. But done right. So here's the thing. So I talked to lots of palliative care physicians,
Mhm.
right? These are the physicians that take care of quality of life. And I
Sure.
asked them the following question. Imagine that when somebody was diagnosed with terminal illness, they came to your care and you had all the time in the world to give them, and you could help them with symptoms and quality of life, and you can help them with everything they need. And you were with them until they passed away. And then half an hour later, after they passed away, you wake them up and you say, you have one more chapter of life to live. Pick which chapter do you want? Do you want elementary school? Do you want college? Do you want which chapter?
Hmm.
And I said,
Interesting.
how many people would pick the last chapter of life? And they said the majority. But they said, if done the right way, if done the right way. And I'll come back to asking you a question in a second. And why is that? It's because, we usually live an unexamined life. We keep on
Mhm.
doing what we're doing out of inertia. This is what we've done before, and so on. And
Mhm.
and midlife crisis is one good opportunity to examine this. Okay, midlife crisis is about, hey, how did I get here? I had different
Right.
plans. Let me see if this is where I really want to do. And I think everybody should have like a midlife crisis every 10 years and really examine
Yes.
where we are.
Right.
But a terminal illness diagnosis is like a midlife crisis on steroids. First of all, it's you can't not think about it. The end is looming, and you don't have more long-term versus short-term trade-offs. So let's say you have a midlife crisis. Oh, I really hate my job, but it pays well, and I have to take care of my family. I don't know how long I'll live. But if you have a terminal illness diagnosis, you say, okay, this is the last chapter. I don't have to think long-term now. I do have to think about just the next few years. So done the right way, people can have a very good last chapter. I don't mean the last 2 weeks. Yeah? The last 2 weeks
Mhm.
are difficult and complex, but the last 5 years
Right.
can be an incredible gift. So My question to
Right.
you is, since you got, of course, we're all very happy that you are cancer free, but when you got the diagnosis, afterward, has it transformed you in some way? Are you is the saliency of life, the saliency of death, your decisions? Do you feel that you're making better decisions now about how to spend your time?
Hmm. Um, that's a good question, and the honest answer is I don't really think about it every day. I just continue to live the way I've always lived.
Yeah.
So when I got this is a really good concrete example. When I got the diagnosis, I was on the golf course. My doctor called me up and said, yes, this is cancer. We're going to get you in with the oncologist, start the treatment process. And I said, okay, cool. Let's set up the appointments and everything. At that same time, I had my oldest granddaughter's wedding coming up, and I was going to walk her down the aisle. And I consulted with my oncologist and said, I'm going to go to the wedding. And they said, fine, we can start the treatment and everything after
Uh-huh.
after the wedding's over. Had my treatments, and um, once they were over, and they were brutal, by the way, especially the last month, side effects and that sort of thing. So it wasn't a very
Yeah.
pleasant experience by any stretch of the imagination. But at the end, I just kept doing the things that I've been doing. I went
Yeah.
back to doing the podcast and looking forward to enjoying life. And if anything, as I said earlier, I'm just more grateful, I guess.
Yeah. But this one thing, and if we talked about more, we would probably find more. When you say there's a wedding and the wedding comes first and we'll manage the treatment, it's good for you and good for your doctor. Um, because most people don't feel like this. Most people say, "Oh, we have to do a treatment. They told me Monday." I'm not questioning it. I'm not telling them that I have something else, and and we just go with it. By
Mhm.
the way, I'm curious. They called you on the golf course. What hole were you on?
What hole was I on? The first.
Oh, the first, just the beginning. How was the game? Did you finish the game?
I finished the game totally. I
Did you
always
play well?
shoot. No, I always shoot between 95 and 100. So,
But it was not an unusual game for you. It wasn't as if you were out of
no,
focus or anything like that.
no,
Interesting.
not at all. Just just the same. I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess, and I guess my question is, and what you seem to be saying, and with respect to doctor-patient relationship, and you said something interesting. You become a patient when
yeah,
you get, that diagnosis. Um, but is it different for different people? I mean, you do these studies
yeah.
and this research, but you're saying on balance, maybe
On
percentage wise.
average, I'm
Hmm.
saying on average, we have a medical Western complex,
Hmm.
and on average, we become we do what we're told, and the medical thing. Look, physicians, there's a joke. Why do they put nails in coffins?
Hmm.
And the joke is
I
to
don't
keep the oncologist out.
know.
They want to do another.
No, but now see, I can appreciate this because of the close relationship I
with,
had with my
with yeah, but
oncologist.
you also recognize that you had a very special relationship with the people
Mhm.
who were treating you, and it's partly about who you are. But in general, look, um, when I teach now at Duke, and when I moved to Duke, and I also have a kind of medical complexities, and you sit there as a patient, and the doctor says, "Hi, Dan, I'm Doctor whatever." And I always say, I feel like saying, "Hey, Professor Ariely for you." Why am I Dan and they're Doctor? But I
Right.
always think I'm going to say this, and then I'm there with this coat, with this robe
Mhm.
and my
Right.
behind is half out, and you feel this small. And I have the
Right.
plan to say it, but then at the moment you're so small and they're so big, and the authority and so on. By now they all know me, so they stop doing it. But I think for most of us, it's very tough not to get into the role of the patient, and we have to fight it. But
Right.
look, um, mortality salience, this notion about thinking there is an end. You don't want it to happen very quickly, but to say there is an end gives you an extra sense of urgency to have a high quality life. It could be gratitude. It could be more attention. It
Hmm.
could be feeling that things are precious.
Hmm.
So, yes, it's sad that people die. I'm not saying it's not sad. And end of life is complex. But when I did a study with about 100 end of life doulas, this is
Mm.
this profession?
Yes. Hmm.
It's mostly women, mostly help the real last period, and they're
Hmm.
not there as a medical professional. They're there to help the person understand and so on. And I asked them, what's a good end of life? And they said four things: no pain, mostly
Hmm.
possible with modern medicine;
Hmm.
no loss of dignity in the body,
Hmm.
not fully possible, but we can do some things for it;
Hmm.
surrounded by love and feeling a
Hmm.
sense of legacy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I thought that observation from them, that summary, is actually very hopeful.
Hmm.
It's actually very hopeful
It is.
because most of it we can do, and we don't have to wait.
Right.
But for example, I actually became an end of life doula after talking to them for such a long time. I went and did the training
Oh,
myself. But
that's great.
for example, if people have bad relationships with
Hmm.
a brother or a sister or a friend or a kid, they try to help them fix that.
Right.
There are things like, think about bad relationships. We delay dealing with this. Oh, I really need to say sorry to my sister, but do I really feel like saying sorry today? I'll say tomorrow. When people
Right.
feel there's a limit, then they say, okay, let me go ahead and do that. And those are the things that I think are unbelievably useful and important.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Well, there's one more thing I want to talk to you because I started my career in medical research and really in molecular biology more than anything else, and talk about irrational. Again, this is a personal interest of mine. So, but you worked on this yourself, and that had to do with working on the documentary. I think it was Out for Blood in Silicon Valley or something like
Yeah,
that, that dealt with the issues at Theranos, where eventually the company was fraudulent, putting out this information
yeah,
about, being able to diagnose illnesses with a tiny drop of blood. So here
yeah,
I am, sitting and I'm hearing about this. And I said, this is the most freaking crazy thing I've ever heard of. Who would believe something like that? And then this woman is raising billions of dollars and has the most prominent people in the world and in the United States backing them. And so for me, that's the epitome of irrational behavior. And so you
yeah,
worked on this documentary, and I'm just kind of wondering what were your thoughts, or why did you see people motivated or taken in by, what to me, I'm just an average guy that,
yeah,
happened to have gotten his degrees in molecular biology 50 years ago. And I'm going, this is some crazy stuff.
yeah. So there's a lot to say about this thing, but look, there is a sense of bravado in Silicon Valley
Hmm.
that basically says, give me enough Stanford undergrads and money and I'll make it work. And, there's no shortage of companies that were science fiction for a very long time. And it was vaporware.
Hmm.
Amazon, do you know for a long time what Amazon was making most of its money from?
Hmm.
Cloud services.
Hmm.
You know,
Right.
it's the biggest supermarket in the world took a very long time to
Right.
actually work. Elon Musk had a dream. For a long time,
Right.
he couldn't fulfill his dream, and Tesla and SpaceX. So it's filled with this idea of give me money and very smart undergrads, and we'll make it work. Now, what she was very wrong about is to apply this to medicine, because yes, you can play with space, you can play with books, you can do these things. The moment you play with people's health, that's a very different story. So
I hadn't
I
thought
think
about it that way.
I like if she gave us all of these stories that she said, and she said, let me work on it. It will take me 10 years, 20 years, and so on. But it was about quantum computing or something. We wouldn't have held her that responsible. But the moment she messed with people's health, that was terrible. So I think that she took on the Silicon Valley bravado. She played the game, but she played it in the wrong domain. And I think she really convinced herself that they have something. So I met with
Self-deception.
her. Yeah, I met with her a few times. And I believe, like, she had no reason to tell me anything, right? We just met privately. I am convinced she believed they really had it, that she just needed some more time. Now, did she make mistakes along the way? Yes, absolutely. Did she make some shortcuts she shouldn't have made? Absolutely. But I think she fully convinced herself. And, when we talk about human irrationality, we're able to convince ourselves of crazy things. Going back to some people are, I have a friend that writes for The Onion. Do you know this
Oh,
satiric?
yes, I know it well.
So she had something that she submitted to them. They didn't take it, that because because there are so many terrorists now, um, how many virgins you get when you get to heaven. You
Right.
get less. Supply and demand. But
Right.
people are able to, we are able to convince ourselves in all kinds of things, in religion, in political ideology, in our romantic life, and so on. The stories we're able to tell ourselves is one of our weaknesses. And the thing about this is, if you think that people are fraudulent, then the cure is easy. But if you think that people are self-deceiving themselves, it means that, here's my belief: if you took her and you interviewed her under FBI lights and with a lie detector, you wouldn't detect a lie because you didn't think she was lying.
Right. Exactly.
Now we can't do that, but and society needs to think very differently about how do we move forward when people are able to do self-deception,
Right.
compared to when people know the truth and lie purposefully. Think about Alex Jones. So Alex Jones, for a while, has been saying that Sandy Hook did never happen. That was a. Do you know the
Right.
story about?
Of
Now,
course, yes.
yeah, I believe that if we investigated him before the trial, before his lawyer told him what to say and so on, he really believed that. He convinced himself. Now it's a crazy
Mm.
thing, but I think we have this amazing capacity for self-deception.
Yes. Well, I'm glad you mentioned self-deception. That was one of the things I wanted to talk to you about, because you talked about, how people tell lies versus truth. You've done research into that, documentaries on
Yeah,
that subject. But when I read some of your work and looked into the documentaries, at the root of it is self-deception.
that's right.
Um,
Our ability to believe what we want. Um, Time is not forgiving, and I have to go for my next meeting. I'm looking forward to talking to you again.
Understand. Well, this has been a wonderful conversation, and yeah, I hope we get a chance to chat again. I'll write you, and but I'm going to publish this conversation, and I'll send you the links to our website at natureandsciencepodcast.com, and of course, you can get the podcast on any podcast channel. And I appreciate you being here today. I know you got to get to work, so thank you, Dan.
A pleasure. Thank you. Talk to you soon.
All right, talk again. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of A Journey Through Nature and Science. We've been chatting with Dr. Dan Ariely about irrationality in human behavior. Please hit the like button so we can continue to grow the podcast and help spread science literacy. And don't forget to leave a comment. We love hearing from you. Next up will be Dr. Henry Ehrlich. Dr. Ehrlich will share his work in criminal justice using the DNA polymerase chain reaction. He has helped free many wrongly convicted individuals over the years. As always, stay safe, share happiness, and remember, never stop questioning. Curiosity has its own reason for existing.